Hello, everybody. My name is Kristen. I do professional development for Tuva as well as many, many other things. Tuva, you may or may not know what we are. Hopefully, we will sort of dive into that a little bit more in our next hour together. Just to make sure everyone's landing in the spot that they are intending to be, we're here to talk about enhancing science instruction at your school or district using Tuva's free instructional resources. And that is my contact information. I'm happy to talk with you. I am the liaison at Tuva to in terms of how you can really leverage these free resources that you have. So what we're going to go over the next hour, we're going to talk about how you access these resources. And this is where I'm going to say, I do consulting work for Tuva 2 days a week. And so I'm going to show you how I think it is that you get to these resources. And then if you have any other questions, I'm going to point you to the folks at South Dakota DOE that can help you, or other folks that can help you if you're having trouble getting in. But everybody should be able to get in. If nothing else, I can give you a direct link to the website and you can access it that way. We're going to navigate around and sort of see what's there and how to leverage it, both like completely for your instruction and also how we can leverage the tools that are there and sort of build off if any of you have used the interim assessments and you're seeing that your students are struggling in any particular areas, like how you can really leverage some of these resources and the features in the Tuva tools to help sort of boost that up before we get to the end of the year assessments. I want to make sure you have a sense of how to set up your classrooms within this resource. And then if you have questions, where can you go to get more supports once we are done with today and moving forward. So that is the plan. Would love to hear from you all before I sort of dive in. You can either sort of unmute or drop in the chat kind of where are we at, who's on the call, what grade levels are you working with, and or what roles do you all serve at your schools or in the districts that you're at. So are we middle school, high school, elementary school, all of the above? Are we classroom teacher, coach, supervisor? So if folks wouldn't mind sharing out, because then I can better tailor what I'm going to share with you all. I would love to get to know the community for the next hour.
My name's Deb Teeger. I am 7 through 12 science in Trip Delmont in South Dakota. So it's a pretty small rural school. So yeah, I have seven different preps.
Thank you for what you do. That is so fantastic. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Bonnie, I also want to say welcome and thank you for coming to join the field. It is so exciting to have you as a first-year teacher. Woo, woo, you're almost to Thanksgiving. Super, super exciting. Excellent. This is great. So excited to be sharing some time with you all today. So let's see. If I can get my slides going. So the way that I have been told that they would like you all to access these resources is to go to this website, sd.portal.cambiumast.com/educators.html, and you should have something that looks like this at the bottom of the screen or something that looks like this at the bottoms of your screens. And when you do that, then you can log in, and another way to get to it is through here and down here. And this is where I'm going to pause. You need to sign in with your SD Gateway email address and password and all of those things. And this is where I'm going to pause and say, does anybody have any questions about that? Because that's what I've been told of how you can access it. And I will put a link in the chat as another way for how you can get to this space. That is a link you could directly go to as well if the other way that I just shared with you is not working. And let me put the link that I shared up. So that second link that I put in the chat is what was on the slide of how to get to these free resources. So these are free and to you all to use What is there once you log in is over 250 science instructional materials that have been curated for you all. The interface, which I'll explain in just a few minutes, can be you can change the language setting across multiple languages if that is relevant to the student bodies the students that are in your course classes that you're working with. And these are resources that are provided by a company called Tuva. So I think it's helpful to kind of even take a step back even further and think about like, well, what is Tuva? So Tuva is an instructional program, and they're particularly positioned for grades 3 through 12, where the emphasis is on bringing real world, authentic, engaging learning into the everyday instruction. And as you can see here on the GIF, the way the tools are set up is to be very interactive. It's drag and drop. You can click. I will say it is far more often intuitive for our learners to figure out how to navigate through than it is for us as adults sometimes to figure things out. But it's driven by research of how students learn and make meaning and make sense of data, and trying to sort of put them into the driver's seat without having to teach them how to code. So how can we kind of give them a bit more autonomy and empower them a bit more to take hold of their learning without having to teach them how to hard code, things like that. Specifically for science, where Tuva positions themselves is by really getting kids engaging in doing science. Data is what we use to do science. It's the evidence we use in many of our cases. It's how we learn about the world and about phenomena. And so the tools in the science offerings through Tuva are really positioned to how can we create those opportunities for our science learners as they are diving in and getting a sense of things. And there's obviously a lot of emphasis on helping our learners understand differences between different graph types, but all with the intention and the focus towards building those data analysis skills and helping our students get to the interpretation, where we can be sort of working with and exploring in the data, not always spending all of our time just trying to make a graph from the data, to really deepen that understanding and deepen that skill set that students have. So in just a moment, I will sort of orient you to the dashboard and how to find these different resources. But before I dive in, I just want to kind of unpack what I mean by instructional resources. So they're all based in real world science, either from simulations or theoretical models that are out there, or from actual measurements that have been taken via a variety of different pieces of equipment. Some of it is historical, some of it is current and up to date, and our time series that we are updating in real time. And one of the benefits is that Tuva has gone out and they've gotten all the copyright privileges to use these data sets, and they have tagged them by different performance expectations and grades and topics and things like that, making it easier for us to think about, okay, what could actually work with my curriculum with this unit that I have coming up, maybe after the break, once you guys are through midterms, as you keep going with this session. So they are aligned with the South Dakota science standards in terms of sort of queuing up on and how we have those expectations in there. And there are three main types of instructional resources that have been provided to you all. So there are activities. Activities are designed to take about a class period. And so I say about because some of us have 42 minutes and some of us have 62 minutes and some of us have like 53, right? Like it depends on how many minutes are actually in our class period, depending on what our bell schedule is. But the intention is that kind of within a period or two, you could get through the activity with your students. And it's really intended to support deep sort of broad learning about the topic. So it's got background information and students are walking in and really diving through different concepts. They're doing a bunch of data moves with data skills, but it is really intended to be like moving towards that science content learning objective that we have. The data is a tool for our students to get to that content learning objective. Our data stories, on the other hand, are designed to be sort of bell ringers, do nows, take about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're really positioned to help students practice in a low floor, high ceiling way certain data skills that they have. So So it's not always a like, oh, I need to like get this data move and the content and to be successful, but trying to provide sort of short little opportunities to get our kids practicing and iterating and building that confidence up over time. And then we have a lot of data sets that are also in there and available to you that may, every activity and data story has a data set behind it, but we also have many other data sets that are in the library available to you that don't yet have activities. And I will explain how you can rectify that and maybe make some activities that are relevant to your learners. So if you are able to access this space, you should get to a place that looks like this. This is called your dashboard. This is our sort of kind of the home base of where to go to when getting a sense of what is going on. And I just want to point out a few things on your dashboard. Your dashboard will look different because you will have different classes here that show up, but otherwise it should look pretty similar. And there's some key kind of getting started resources along the right-hand side where we've got a sense of kind of how to get going on what's here. We've got a call out to those interim assessments and which performance expectations are included. This is what that looks like if you dive in. So we just have captured the first couple pages that were shared with us by the Department of Education in South Dakota to get a sense of, which expectations were they using. And then this, how to create your own activity. We're going to come back to that in just a quick moment. And I will also a little bit later give you a sense of sort of what is this create activity. We always try to kind of give a little call out to some new things that have come onto the site down here. But the content library, so that's helpful for sort of orienting, but the content library is really where there's a lot of rich material and where we can find all of these 250 instructional resources that you might have. So let me pause for a second, and I'd love to get a sense either through like Zoom reaction or the chat window. Before I sort of keep moving along, can I get a sense of who's been able to log in and access that page that I was just showing you?
I had logged in and I looked at it, but then I kind of got bogged down into figuring out like what the activities and like
Yeah.
I got stuck looking at it.
Yeah. Yep, that's okay. And thank you so much for sharing that. There's a lot there, which is why we wanted to offer this webinar because there's a lot there and it's like, where am I? What am I doing? I just want to make sure that folks are able to log in. Great. So it looks like folks are able to log in. So let me keep going with this sort of, let me orient you to all of the many things that are going on here. So what I want to point out are a couple things. So here, sorry, I need to move you all out of the way so I can show you things. So these three toggle on and off. Those are the three types of instructional resources that I just summarized for you. So let's say you're jumping in and you're like, I just want to look for an activity. Well, we can turn off all of the other, all of those short, quick data stories I was telling you about, or just the like, I don't want to know the data sets. I just want to look for like what are prepared activities that you have. And as you can see, we've got 117. Now, I don't know about you, but that still seems like a really large number of things that we might want to look for. So let's say we are, I think Bonnie, you said that you're in 5th through 8th grade. So let's say we are interested in looking for, you've done an interim assessment and your students were really struggling with one of those. So we want to come in and kind of take a better sense of what's going on. So let's see if we kind of jump in here. What are some options that we have for specific kind of grade 5 performance expectations? What are activities that align with it? Okay, so now what we've done is now we've gone from 250 to 117 to 3 that are aligned with this to help with this specific performance expectation. So I would say this is one way to really leverage the filtering capabilities of this content library. It's large because we have resources for grades 3 through 12. But that doesn't apply even, Deb, with your 7 preps. For each individual prep, there's like one, you want to get down to what's the content area that you have with your specific class. So you can search by grade band through here. You can search by performance expectations. What I just did was sort of at the like top tier category, and then by individual performance expectations. You can also just search by specific topics. And so maybe you're interested in a human impacts, like your kids have gone sort of berserk on natural hazards, and you're really curious, like what might be some activities that you could use with them. And so there's different ways that you can filter down and find some resources in here. Another thing that I want to point out is that what you can also do, so that's kind of one way to drill down and find sort of what is available, what might be relevant that I can use with my learners, be it what you're teaching and where you're going, and you're looking for an activity or a resource that you could use. Or, as I mentioned, you've got a sense based on you've given out some of these interim assessments, and you've gotten the data back, and you have a sense of like, oh man, my students are like really struggling with this one. You can come in and specifically look for a resource that is aligned with that performance expectation that they might be struggling with at the time. Another option is that the default is that it is queued up to sort of have the most recent at the top. And so that's to help communicate sort of what might be different from the last time that you jumped in. You can click over to popular, and that gives you a sense of what are other folks in South Dakota using with their students. And that would, then in case that's helpful, of a like, oh, I hadn't, thought about maybe using this data story of which way is up. And I wouldn't have found it by sort of drilling down, but interesting to see, oh, others are using it. Maybe I'll check it out and get a sense of what that is. So that's what these 2 buttons are for. This is to just sort of another way to help you get a sense of all of these 250 resources, of which there are many, what is there, and how you might be able to sort of start finding ones that you can actually use for your classroom and for your learners. Now, as you're going through and exploring these and getting a sense of, what might be interesting, maybe let's say we jump in here to the intertitle biodiversity. You get caught by like, oh, this is really cool. I've got biodiversity coming up in the new year. And so you get sort of sidetracked and you're interested in it, and you read through. As you jump into any one of our activities, this is how they're always organized. So let me orient you a little bit to it. So we've got the teacher overview page, where we give sort of the big picture overview of what is it we're doing. This is usually sort of 2 to 3 sentences. So this is very high level, very at the 40,000 foot. And then we've identified what are the learning objectives that the developer was trying to get at with the resource. And as you can see, as I'm scrolling down, there's all sorts of different ways that each resource has been tagged. So you can kind of get a sense of what else is in there. A bunch of the resources have this sort of a student version or a teacher version supporting document that you can print out as a I believe they're PDFs. They might be Google documents on some of them. And then you can actually read through and look through the whole activity like this and see what's actually happening. I have to say, this is great, but this is not how my brain works. My brain usually works by trying it out and seeing what it actually looks like as a student to walk through, which we'll do in just a moment. But what I want to point out is the bookmark. You might be reading through and you might be like, oh, this is awesome for my next unit. And like, okay, I got sidetracked. This was a good one. Well, you can bookmark it so you don't have to remember, it was biodiversity, but was it of owls or owl limpets? Like what was it? You can just bookmark it. And then it will show up if we go back to our content library. We'll be able to see, we can click on this, my bookmarks, and anything that you have bookmarked, any activity, data story, or data set will show up here in your My Bookmarks section. So that's another way, as you're starting to sort of scroll through and get a sense of what is here, a good way to mark for later. If you're kind of like, flag, not useful right now because of what I need, but might be useful coming up in a week or 2 or the next unit, things like that. Okay. How are we doing? Any questions so far? You can unmute or drop them in the chat. Okay, got a thumbs up that we're doing well. So let's keep going, because what I want to do is I want to give you sort of a demonstration on how we can try that out as a student. And then I'm going to give you guys some time to jump in and explore some things. So here we are back at the content library. I jumped into a different fifth grade Earth systems. I always forget what the S's stand for. Our Earth science. And let's say we want to look at this one, this water on Earth. And as I shared, as you can see again, this is how all of them are structured with this. The try it as a student is what I find to be most helpful, because then that gives me really a sense of what is it my learners are going to be seeing and how are they going to be interacting with it. What I do want to point out is that there are some pages that you will see as a teacher through a teacher account that your students will not see. For example, the learning objectives. Your students will not see this page. We've tried to indicate that here with this dark blue banding here of that this is teacher only. Your students would not get to this. Instead, what they would get to is this. This would be the first page that they would land on in the activity. And overall, this is how the instructional resources are set up. Along the right-hand side are the kind of step-by-steps, the questions, the prompts, get the instructions for how your learners can walk through an activity. And then the majority of the space, the real estate on the page, it is for the data. These data at the moment are just floating out here in random places in space because we haven't yet picked any attributes or variables, as we often call them in science, to plot, to take a look at. Just a little bit more of an orientation. So we can always click on the table view and get a sense of what's actually going on in the data. And so that can be really helpful to get a sense of what's happening. And what you might see is that each of these column headers, those are the attributes or the variables that we have. And they also show up here in what Tuva calls the case cards. And the case cards give you a sense of what are the values for that particular case, for that instance of observation. And it'll bring up the actual value. So I click on that happened to be case 3, and then I can click over here. This happens to be case 8, and we can see that these are changing. That's a helpful piece of giving kids that understanding of this point that is just at the moment randomly positioned right there represents multiple observations across our different attributes. And then we can go in and we can start exploring things out. We can start asking questions. And so you can click through an activity and get a sense of, what would it do? In this case, it's asking me, okay, drag and drop fresh and salty onto the y-axis. So you just click and drag it over, and then you get a sense, and there's some questions for students to kind of think about and answer depending on the activity. And we're going to go through these in a little bit more throughout our hours, sort of what kinds of questions those are. But hopefully that gives you sort of an initial sense of what are all of these pieces and how do they fit together and how to start finding things. What I would love to share is that as you're diving in and exploring these different activities, we have 2 different kinds of activities in that sometimes learners are really new to the assigned content area, to the data skills that they're working on. And it's really helpful for them to have some sort of fair amount of hand holding or a fair amount of guiding where we're going to go step by step by step as we work through the data set or as we work through what it is that we're trying to interpret from the data. So these we call our guided activities. Sometimes our students are pretty good. We're trying to get a sense of what their mastery is, what they can do, how can they can apply their knowledge and understanding. And we don't want it as like handheld step by step by step. So we also have what we call student directed activities where it's more open ended. The student needs to decide, are we going to sort of go here or here or here, or maybe go all the way over here? And that is intentional to create sort of both of these opportunities for the learners so that we can kind of take off those scaffolds when they're ready to go through it. So you might come across things that say guided or student directed, and I just wanted to give you a sense of what that meant. So what I would like to do is I'd then like to invite you all to jump in, log in to the site, go to the content library, play around with those filters a little bit, and find either an activity or a data story that is relevant to your course. Maybe think like, post our holiday next week. What's something you could use on that first week back? Either that's just aligned with the course curriculum that you have, or that's like based off of, from the interim assessments that they're struggling this particular area. And so like, what might be an option of a resource that you can kind of queue up for that week after our break, our mini break next week? And then what I invite you to do is do what I just did. Is try it out as a student, click on that top right-hand corner like I did, and sort of click through a couple of those next screens so that you can kind of get a sense of how the activities are organized and aligned. It will take about 4 minutes to do this. I am here if you have any questions. This is part of the intention of the webinar, is like you have a live person who can answer any questions that you have to make it feel less just sort of big and open-ended and not sure where to go, and more how can I actually leverage this resource for what it is. Questions, comments of what I'm inviting you all to do? Okay, I am here. If you've got any questions, feel free to unmute, drop a note in the chat. And just as a reminder, so we're going to spend about 4 minutes to log in, explore that content library, find an activity or a data story or a data set if you would prefer. But the data sets don't have this try as a student feature. So that's why I was encouraging you to try to pick an activity or a data story to look at. And do a little bit of sleuthing, sort of get familiar with the site. Yay, playing.
Kristen, I just clicked on one and it tells me that it's a premium activity. So as South Dakota teachers, do we not have access to those?
You absolutely should have access to those. Can you?
Okay. I'm on plate tectonics in the Atlantic, and I started out on part 1, and I clicked just from part 1, it says in part 2, apply. So I clicked part 2, and yeah, I get the teacher overview. It's the second of a 2-part activity. And then it says, this is a premium activity. Upgrade to Tuva Premium to access this and 1,000+ more activities, data stories, and data sets.
Can you screen share, Bonnie?
Yes, I learned how yesterday. Give me a second. I'll try to remember.
Okay, it should be on the bottom. Oh, yeah, there it comes. Okay, yeah, okay. So you are at the Tuva. This is really confusing. So the URL, see where it says https:/tuvalabs.com.
Okay.
And we need you to be at SD Instructional Resources.
Oh my gosh.
So somehow you got into the Tuva has this whole other set of things. And yes, if you are not part of South Dakota, you need to pay for premium. But the South Dakota Department of Ed has paid for you all to get much of the premium resources for free. So that's why we want to make sure. So if you click on the Earth's magnetic field, that other window just to the left, that has an IR in the top. Yeah, so that's on the instructional resources. So if you, this is, so do you see up on the
I
URL
clicked right
there?
here on part 2.
Okay. So this is so helpful. Okay. So that's a note for me. I will take that back to the team and we will update that accordingly because you should be able to get part 2 because I can.
Well, I could probably find it. I just, from right here, it didn't let me go.
Totally. So I'm going to take over screen sharing to show you that I can find it on the SD Instructional Resources. So thank you for sharing. I will make a note and I will tell the team at Tuva that that's a broken link. They got to fix these links because that is not helpful for you all. So
thank you.
Great question. Yeah, totally. Awesome question. Okay. How are others doing? Are there other questions or comments that are coming that are surfacing up as you guys are jumping in and playing around with it? Okay. Not hearing any. What I do want to do is do a little bit more demoing. Or Deb, did you have a question?
Okay. Okay. So as I'm looking at them as I'm playing as a student and you're answering the questions, do these get logged in and then sent to you or something?
Yes. What a great question. I was going to go there.
It's like planted in the audience. Okay.
Planted in the audience. Can I pause to answer that question just for a quick second? Because I just want to demonstrate a few more things about the features. And then literally that was where we were going to go next. So that is such a fantastic question. Okay. So just want to kind of point out a few things as you're jumping around. You might be checking out a resource. You can try it as a student, or maybe you just kind of want to jump in and just sort of take a look. You can easily sort of get that part of the screen to go away. As I mentioned, there's sort of a bunch of different graph types that we have. So this is a data set that I love, and the activity is about, what is it called? It's like comparing groups of dinosaurs. And so as I was sort of showing earlier, we can drag and drop and we can get a sense of sort of the dinosaurs that lived across different geologic periods, sort of how many years, millions of years ago were they around. We can also change the color up to make it a little bit easier to see across. There's also a lot of options in terms of adding statistical measures onto the graphics as annotations. And so what if we want to sort of look at the average of across these 3 different geological periods? When were these sort of, how many millions of years ago on average were those alive? I find it really helpful to show the labels. So it's not just sort of this random floating bar, but then we can get a label as to what the bar is actually showing us. And then, okay, so that's great, but maybe we want to see, does the height of the dinosaurs, how does that compare across these 3 geologic periods? Or, the length of it. So what I'm showcasing here is that because it's set up in this drag and drop feature, we can ask different kinds of questions, multiple iterations of questions with just some simple clicking on and off and dragging and dropping for our students to interact with it, as opposed to needing to go kind of back to Google Sheets and copying different components of data and then going through the sort of graph wizard that Google Sheets has, where you kind of like do a little circle and dance and hope that the graph comes out the way that you want it to. So this is intentional. You cannot break it. It's really easy to just reset things if something doesn't happen, or you can undo your last move, and you can keep undoing your last move if you want to go backwards. What I also want to point out is that you can get, this is all, you can jump in and you can label things up the way that you want. I'm really bad at typing while talking at the same time, so thank you for your patience with all of my typos that I've got going on here. There are some other settings that you can change. If you would like the font size to be bigger, you can adjust that, or the case size to be bigger. This is often helpful when we are, for instance, wanting to take a screenshot of the graph that we've produced. So some of the activities within there, you can easily, the students can upload their graphic right into it. And again, I'll show you in a second where you see that. Or maybe you have provided the URL to your learners within your learning management system, and you want them to, kind of go through the steps, but then copy their graph into your learning management system so they can download it as a JPEG or a PNG file, or they can just copy and paste it right into your learning management system. So I wanted to point out a few of those features. Here's a data set where for up at the high school level, this is a physical science looking at relationship of pressure and volume and gases. And so let's say we're interested in kind of how do pressure and volume relate to one another. So we can graph out these data, but again, there's sort of this extra layer of what we can do in that we can fit a function to the data. And there are a bunch of preloaded different kinds of functions that you could fit to the data. And then you can go in and you can sort of play around with that K value, that K parameter, and get a sense of it. And what we're seeing is as I'm adjusting K, the fit is changing. You can also by hand go in and adjust it, different things like that. So if you want to kind of, if we have older students and we want them to go farther than just, okay, make a graph, like let's get a sense of like, what kind of relationship is this? What kinds of things are going on? We can also add sort of reference point lines into the graphic. So let's say we were interested in figuring out kind of what would the pressure be if the volume were at 4. So I'm just expanding out so we can start to do some predictions based on these data. And I can line this up, and then I can kind of pull this down, see where that overlaps with the green, and then I've got a sense. So we have these additional features that you can add on. There are also a variety of different annotation tools. Any of these things that your learners are adding on to the graphs as they are making sense of it, making meaning through it, will come out when they take a screen grab of the graphing interface. So anything they add on, if they do the screen grab, the screenshot, then it will come out for you as they are interacting with that graphic. Okay, so I'm going to go to the okay, well, so, but how does this work? As they're answering those questions, where do they end up? Well, so this gets back to how you can sync this up with your classes really easily. So if you are a Google school, you can link it directly through your Google account into your classrooms, and then it's got this nice synergy on how to make that work. And there are some in this help resource, In our help section, there are step-by-steps of kind of how to set up your Google Classroom. And let's see if I can find it quickly on the fly. And no, I cannot at this exact moment, but I will pull that back up for you. Another way is that you can create a class within this system. And so if you're not a Google school, or if you are and want to, so let's say we've got an 8th grade class. I think that overlaps with folks that are here. And let's say this is period 2, 8th grade class that we have. When the class code, when you've created a class, then there are 3 different ways that you can add your students to that class. So each class has a class code, so you can give your students that code, and when they are logging into this site, the sd.instructionalresources.org, they just type in that class code and they'll automatically be linked to you. Another option is when we jump into this classes, we can see this nice link right here, which is invite students to join. And then we can just so nicely copy and paste that URL. So that is another way. If you just want to drop that URL into your LMS, then students can click directly on it and they will be logged in. Or you can also manually add students in one by one. So there's 3 different ways that you can get students in. Now, let's see, this one's got some students in it. So once you've done that and your students are in and you've assigned a lesson, oh, I didn't even explain. That means nothing. Let me go back. So let's say you've tried this out as a student and you're super excited and you want to assign it. So you can, from the activity, you can assign it to a specific class that you have, or from within a class, you can go to assign activity. And you can activity, data story, whichever you would prefer. And so then it goes out to your students. Whatever students are part of your class will get a notification. It will pop up on their screen that, Miss HT, my last name, has assigned me this assignment to do. From the teacher perspective, we can see how many students have started it or not, if they've completed it, or if they're in progress. So that gives us a bit of a sense of what's going on. Now we can dive in even deeper and we can get a sense of what are the student responses. And one of the things that I love that Tuva launched last year, or I guess about a year and a half ago now, is that you can look through this in different ways. So when you are assigning an activity, it will ask you how many points you want to assign to it. And if you want to make any notes to your students to it, you can also assign this point value after the fact if you would prefer. So we can look at it student by student. So here I'm getting a sense of what Kayla McGowan said for each of their responses to each question. And you can go through and you can add comments based on individual questions, and or you can provide a comment overall about how this student did on that particular activity. You can also, though, look question by question across all of your students to be able to get a quick sense of okay, most of them did B, but it looked like A was the distractor that, caught a few folks off guard. So to kind of get those patterns, that sense of kind of where's the class overall with it. So Deb, did that answer your question of kind of when they're entering these, where does it go? This is how you can look at it within the interface. Okay, hopefully that made sense. And as I was saying, you can kind of get a sense of when it was assigned. This sort of due by is one of the notes. You can always update those notes, different things. So one thing that I want to point out is that you might be going through and finding either a resource, like here, the sizing up dinosaur plots that already exists, and you're like, this is close, but not exactly what I want. So I want to make a new activity. I want to build out a new activity that uses this data set. And so Tuva has created this create an activity, I should say. So this is either for our data sets that currently have activities, or you can also do this for, let's say you're jumping in, looking through this filtering menu, and you're like, I'm just not finding anything on what I need. And I'll be honest, there are a couple performance expectations where we just don't have anything yet. Our team is working hard, they're building lots of things, we've got some gaps, we know that, we're building them out. So maybe you come through and you're like, okay, I'm not finding what I need. I want a data set. And you look through, so you drop out the activities and data stories and you jump in and you're like, oh, this data set, this is what I want to use. So either way, this one actually has an activity. You can create your own activity and then it'll take you through. So the data set will come up. You can add a title to it. And then you will be prompted to step through to add a description. What are your learning objectives for it as you go through? One thing I want to point out is that the system is automatically saving your work as you go through and build out this activity. So here's some background information that you want to provide to your students. Again, you can't type and talk at the same time. Once you get through those pieces, then you get to where you can add a question. And we've got 4 different types of questions that you can put in. And this sort of, as you can see, these pop-up boxes are coming along, telling you kind of what is this. For the multiple choice or multiple answer questions, you will be prompted to put in the solution for your learners. And that's the way the system will automatically grade or sort of provide feedback as students go along the way. So let's say we want to add a question. Let's see, we want a multiple choice question and we want which geological period had the most dinosaurs from this data set. Oh, no, I'm not in dinosaurs. What am I looking at? So which week of the season had the most flu cases? We can just adjust on the fly. And let's see. You can kind of type in some options A, week 2, different things like I am just doing this to give you a sense of how this works. So option week 2 is the answer. Once you have some questions in here, you will notice something has changed. So now this is a button that I can actually click on. So as I said, you can always exit. It's automatically saving as you go through. When you go to publish an activity, it is always published privately. Only you can see the activity, which is great. That means you can go back, you can edit it. Nobody else in the sdinstructionalresources.org interface will see it. And you might be thinking, okay, that's great, especially as I've got typos and all these things here. But Kristen, I'm doing this activity so that I can share it with my students. Awesome. Once you are done, you can always go back in here and edit it. Once you're done editing it and you've got it ready to go, you can click here for assign and then select which class you want to assign it to. And then it will show up. If I do this here, you can see, let's say it's got a 10 points and please complete by tomorrow. So now it has been assigned to my period 2. If I go back to the dashboard and look at period 2, it shows up here. So your students will be able to see it once you have assigned that activity. And so I just want to share out, that's a really robust new feature that Tuva launched on Monday for you all. So super excited to share that out with you. Okay, that was a lot of me talking and demonstrating things. So I want to pause and see, how are we doing? Do we have any questions, comments, concerns about what I'm demonstrating and what I was clicking on and how I was making that all happen? If you've got any questions, you can post them in the chat or you can unmute to ask them. Okay, seems like we're doing pretty well here. So I want to point out, I kind of mentioned this earlier, that there are, actually, let me go here first. So on the dashboard, we have tried to provide, we recognize that this is a lot and it can be a lot to take in. But we also are providing a lot so that this is a really robust resource for you and your colleagues. And so it's kind of that tension of how do we make it robust and worthwhile so that you can really leverage it to help with your instruction or follow up on these interim assessments to help your students practice those skills or those content areas, while also making it manageable and something that we can figure out kind of on the fly during the year to get our students up and running with. So just to point out again, there's sort of these getting started resources, the interim assessment call out, and then this one, the create your own activity. I basically just walked through each of these steps, but we also have it here in a resource for you to use if you want to go back and reference that, as well as our support desk. So through this help window, always at the top of the navigation page, you will land here. And yes, this does take you to Tuva support. So the easiest way to differentiate is SD instructional resources is in this pretty purple and orange. And Tuva, if you land in green and orange, you know you've gone to a Tuva site, but that's okay. This is on purpose. And in this instance, this is actually where we're trying to direct you because all the support's exactly the same and we want you to have all of this fantastic support. And so if you were thinking about sort of getting started and jumping in and how to make sense of it, you guys have Tuva Premium. And so you can kind of jump in and get started here, different questions that you might have. And so I just want to point that out as a resource, as a place to reach out to. And then I am a resource as well. So a couple of few last things that I want to leave you with before we wrap up is the Tuva originally was designed in this way. It requires the internet, and so it requires a device. I would say we have had really good success with partner computing around Tuva, where we put 2 students to 1, if that works in your system. If you don't have 1-to-1, then there can be a lot of great resources. And we have learned over the last 3 years that it works in person, it works hybrid, and it works remotely online. Because of the students get access to everything that you have access to with their accounts. Your students are linked to your accounts, and you all have free accounts to all of these features and resources there with you. So just kind of wanted to share that out in whatever life might bring in the coming months, though I really, really hope that we all get to stay here in that in-person land that we really like. Good learning science tells us that it's helpful when we've learned new information, when we've sat and participated in things, to take a few moments to reflect out and think about sort of what just happened before we keep like charging through and moving forward in the day. So I want to create some space. We're going to take about 2 minutes to think of either sort of what was a big takeaway from today, or what else would be helpful for you in terms of using these freely available instructional resources with your students to leverage across these interim assessments to set them up for success in whatever capacity. What else would be helpful so that either I and the rest of us at Tuva can provide that for you, or I will share that out with the department, the South Dakota Department of Education, to bring up to be like, okay, this is what they're saying. This is what else would be useful and helpful. So I'm going to stop talking. There are some of us that talk and think really quickly, and there are other of us that need to sort of think before we talk. So I'm going to stop talking. We're going to take 2 minutes, and I invite you to reflect on one of these questions and share it out in the chat. take about 30 more seconds to kind of wrap up our thoughts, drop them in the chat, share out with one another. Okay, so hopefully you had some time to reflect a little bit, think about sort of what can you walk away with from today or what else would be helpful. Please feel free to share those with us at any time. So let me share the contact information. Excuse me, my mouse itches. So any questions that you might have going forward on how do we actually, how do I use this? Or you said this thing and I don't really remember, I can't find it. Or as Bonnie so nicely pointed out, like this link takes me to this thing that I can't access, but I think I need to. So any of the like, how can I integrate it into my teaching? Please feel free to send me an email. This is part of my job, is to support you all. If it's a like tech question of like my login isn't working or my students are struggling, getting access to things, or the link is broken, then support@Tuva Labs is the best email to use. As I said, I only work for Tuva 2 days a week, but there is always somebody at support. I'm pretty convinced like 24 hours a day. Their turnaround is just blows my mind. If you have questions regarding kind of the setup of your classroom and accessing the site overall, then please reach out to this South Dakota CIA help desk and their email address. They are there ready and willing to help you all with that. I did just want to, before we wrap up at the top of the hour, I did just want to point out sort of that coming back to like, how can you set your students up with Google Classroom? So that is in the help resources. So again, from our dashboard here through help. And if you click on product support, you get a whole range of different kinds of options. And one of them is updating your list or setting up your Google Classrooms, things like that. And so I wanted to circle back to that because I was not able to find that on the fly as that came up. So I will stay on if you have any questions. It was wonderful talking with you all. Thank you for spending an hour with me at the end of your day. I know it's a long day and there's a lot going on with where we are in the marking period and the holiday coming up next week. I hope you all have happy, healthy, and restful in whatever way you would like it to be holidays next week. So thank you so much. So Deb brought up a really great point. So thanks for sharing that you're thinking about using this with your 7th graders, but that sort of wanting to have a little bit more practice yourself to feel confident. Yes, it sort of takes time. I would suggest some of those activities are like pretty easy, or not pretty easy, but the guided activities that kind of walk you through step by step are a really great way to start to build that comfort with the new system. And then I would also share that sometimes I have found, as I have watched this go live in classrooms, like it's sometimes harder for us as adults to like figure out the drag and drop, and our students sometimes are like off
definitely.
to their races. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
But as you're going through and trying to build out that comfort or confidence, please reach out. I'm happy to help in whatever way that I can.
Okay.
Yeah, awesome.
Not a problem. Yeah, I want to feel like I'm leading, not following a little bit.
Yeah, totally. I totally get it. It's always a little scary, like unnerving to be like, I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
And like the best thing is to say it can't break. This is like one of the things that I love about it. And you can undo. They added the undo feature, which is another thing that I love, that it's like, oh wait, that didn't do what I wanted. Undo. Oh, look. Okay, now we're back. And
good to know.
Yes, definitely. Well, wonderful to see you all. You've got my contact information. I will drop it in the chat as well if you'd like to just sort of copy and paste it over. Reach out if you have any questions, and enjoy. Thank you for all that you do every day for all of your learners, and we will be in touch. Thanks.